Welcome to episode 56 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men, the animated series weekly recap podcast. I'm Rod, and I didn't think of something to introduce myself with. Look me up on the internet, I guess.
And I'm JC. You can find me online at the John Carl on pretty much everything, as well as Whiskey and Waffles. And hopefully by the time this episode airs, I'll have been streaming something on Twitch. But importantly, we have our most anticipated guest of the series so far, aside from anybody who's worked on the actual show, Joe Russo.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me back for a second of 4 episodes.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Joe Russo month.
That's right. It's Joe Russo month. Joe Russo like Marvel. Joe Russo like X-Men. Joe
Suck
Russo.
it, Nightcrawler month.
Joe
Yeah,
Russo.
right. Yeah, each Joe gets their own month.
That's right. That's right. I think that's how it works out.
Yep.
Actually, do I get more episodes?
Oh, yeah, you get like 2 more.
By default, you are.
So I will be the longest running guest. Excellent.
Yeah.
That was my plan.
Yeah, because Wally had 2 episodes. Joe Slepsky had the 2 Nightcrawler episodes, which was only based off of 1 in-show episode.
Yeah,
Well-
you'll be the only on-purpose multiple episodes.
The good news is this is going to be 5 episodes by the time we're done. Because, you ready, John? Are you ready for what I brought you?
If it's a pun, I'm going to kick you out.
No, it's better than that. So, several times over the course of the show, because I've listened to every single episode since you told me you were doing this, several times over the show, Ron has asked you about the movie Get Out. So I have brought the screenplay, which I'm going to read to you over the course of this episode. Since you won't watch it,
I will
we're
watch
going to
it.
read it to you.
It's now a bit.
Oh, remind me, I want to talk to you about something about Get
He
Out.
thinks I'm kidding, but I have
No,
it
I
right.
didn't
have it
think he
right
was
here.
kidding.
I want to talk to you about something about Get Out that's even too far of a tangent for this podcast.
Well, I'll save it for a little bit later when things get a little dry. Maybe I'll just dive into some pages and
But
bring
we
them to
did
John.
forget to breadcrumb some more of your projects last episode.
Oh,
So
that's
what else
true.
have
Yes,
you-
we did say the greatest beer run ever last time, right? So
We hit that last one.
Let's see. Well, what else? What else could we say? I've done a movie called Nightmare Cinema.
You have.
I produced a movie called Nightmare Cinema. That's a pretty good one.
Joe likes horror and pizza,
I
basically.
like horror and pizza. You
It's
can
a great
find me
combo.
online at Joe Russo Tweets and at Joe Russo Graham on Twitter and Instagram, respectively. And you can find lots of pizza photos that John Carl complains about.
Well, maybe eat good pizza.
I do eat good pizza. LA has great pizza.
Cyclops
Great.
is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single episode of the original 1992 X-Men The Animated Series in their original intended script order, building to the release of X-Men 97, which is supposedly coming to Disney Plus later this year.
Chills.
Some quick reminders. We're a recap show about a series that started now over 30 years ago. There will be spoilers. If you don't want spoiled for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, and come back. We'll do our best to avoid mentioning anything about future episodes we haven't covered yet.
Or just be a sociopath like Joe and don't watch the episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Do what I do.
I love that the version of the animated universe is through the lens of us.
I mean, here's the thing. I've seen them all, right? I've seen every single one of them. So when I listen to you guys talking, it's just like a nostalgia thing, you know?
You know, that's the way I watch nostalgia content is like, I don't necessarily want to rewatch Captain Planet because it's like super dry to rewatch.
Sometimes it's fun to listen to people that, I mean, obviously I've known JC for far longer than probably either of us care to admit.
I think we've hit 20 years now.
Oh, dear God, I think you're right. Holy shit.
If it's not 20 years, it's like 19.
No, it's 20 years.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, and then through listening to the show, Rod, you've become like a podcast friend, right? That's
Oh,
a
nice.
thing.
Yeah.
People, I saw a really great meme one time where it was like, "Mom, I made new friends," and she's like, "Real or podcast?"
Oh, I didn't see that. That's awesome. Well, glad to finally meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. We should have done that on the last episode.
It's a time travel episode. We don't have to worry about
Yeah,
continuity.
that's exactly right.
We're going to invite you onto the podcast at the end of the 4th episode.
Perfect.
Because it's time travel. That's how it works.
Oh
Anyway,
boy,
and we're definitely sponsored by Disney Plus.
that's right.
You can't
You
lie.
admitted it.
You can't lie
I
and
knew
say
it.
we're sponsored if we're not
I knew
actually
it.
sponsored.
I knew it. I've known it for the whole year when I've been listening.
There's like a rogue intern.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. Of course, make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast services. I mean, it's entirely possible that somebody's listening to this on YouTube. For some reason, we still get people who listen to full episodes on YouTube. It's so weird to
Yeah,
me.
that was great. I did
Now
go
those are sociopaths. Sorry,
Love you.
YouTube person.
You mean you don't like our visualizer that is just the audio thing going up and down?
I actually have not seen it, but that's pretty funny.
Yeah,
I do get it though, because I listen to some podcasts when I fall asleep, but I don't want to keep running, you know? So I do the YouTube one because it'll just play that episode and then just be done, you know?
It doesn't go to the next thing?
No,
I
not on
think
YouTube.
YouTube always goes to the next thing.
You can turn that off.
Oh, I have
You
all
can't-
turned off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
there you go.
Especially for those podcasts, because like I said, I'm not going to like subtweet anybody on a podcast, but like there's some podcasts where
Bullshit.
like, yeah.
Bullshit. You've done it before.
Well, subtweet this specific one where I fall asleep.
Ron, I will tell you, there is a way to put a sleep timer on podcasts on your iPhone.
But when
I'll show you how to do it.
But when I'm passing out, I'm not thinking that
All right,
complex.
fair.
I'm looking up like redacted podcasts because it's boring enough to make me fall asleep.
Interesting. Yeah.
Finally, we record these episodes in batches. There's no news coming up about the series, but you could tell we start to lose our shit as we go through them. This is now the first drinking episode.
Oh yeah. We're recording during the
Hooray.
day today, so I'm drinking now.
Hooray.
I mean, it's like White Claw, so I'm like,
So proud of you.
thanks. I always have a cup of coffee, so before this started, I was like, up or downer, up or downer. I was going to alternate. Anyway, now to the show.
Hey, we made it. We made it to the show.
You know what? We're doing better.
If you've hung
than
with us this far.
We're doing 20 minutes better than the Nightcrawler episode.
Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about season 4, episode 19, titled "Beyond Good and Evil," part 2, Promise of Apocalypse. Sorry, this is literally the first time I'm reading this.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
There's like
Oh,
literally-
I can't wait to title it on YouTube because we're only limited to 100 characters. I don't think I could put the full title of the episode and the title of our show in that line.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
and I have to render out those thumbnails. That's going to be fun. I
Yeah.
have all those characters on there.
Yeah, you do.
You know, literally, I always say like younger me would be proud. Literally, like 6 or 7 year old me would be proud of this because I'm only reminded of this. Speaking of tangents, I'm only reminded of this because I recently had some dental work done. My dentist was like, "What's wrong with under your tongue?" I was like, "Oh, when I was a kid, I had a speech impediment. They had to do surgery on me."
Oh.
And so I literally couldn't have said that title
Wow.
as a kid.
Wow. Hey.
Applause for Rod.
Watch me listen back to this. I'm like, you mangled. Why?
You
why-
would never, ever have guessed that ever listening to this show.
Well, nice side effect of not drinking is if I'm either like drunk or high or tired or something like that, all that defense comes down.
Oh, good. Let's get him drunk.
You mean the entirety of your TikTok?
Yes. I was like, yeah, I remember tonight's Wayne. Look at that. Anyway, aired November 11th, 1995. Currently sits at an 8.1 star rating on IMDb. It's consistent.
Yeah, the 4 ratings are 8.1, 8.1, 8.0, and 8.2. So fairly consistent throughout this.
And the average is the same.
Yes.
Anyway,
Good episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
thanks for listening. No,
And best recap ever.
Anyway, speaking of recaps, the recap for this episode, they mentioned the thing about Apocalypse coming back to the pyramid, but they show us footage of him recharging Lazarus chamber that we hadn't seen yet.
Yes.
That's never been in any episode of any of the shows
No.
ever.
This.
A bit from like later in the fourth
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, I think that's in the 4th part or 3rd
Yeah.
part where they actually show that footage.
That's cheating.
Right,
I
they spoil
mean,
themselves.
this show has done that before. If you go to the Juggernaut episode where he loses his power, it shows him walking through the ocean to come to America. That footage had never existed, but it was shown in the recap.
Interesting.
I'm just assuming since it's a recap. Well, also, I think we talked about this before. X-Men was one of the first, at least animated shows that did recaps since
Yeah.
it was serialized. So they were probably, for kids especially, trying to visualize like the situation because just Cable saying it might not have set in. Right?
Yeah, that's fair.
If you're younger, I don't. That's the justification.
That's what we're going with.
But because of the Juggernaut episode, which is why we will actually not skip past the previously ons.
Wait, you don't watch the credit sequence?
I skipped the credit
You
sequence.
skip the credit. What? That's like the best part of the show.
Yeah, I don't. But
The amount of times I've listened to it, I have to.
No.
I usually.
Gee, you know what? You should just end this show now. Like, you're not a truth fan.
Good thing we're friends with the composer.
But the recaps, I remember, I think it was the first run of Phoenix Saga or whatever. I made a comment, I was like, did you notice they use like real fire effects on her on the recap part?
Oh, I remember listening to that.
Because they didn't use it in the episode.
It was not in the episode. It was the real fire that happened at the coming soon Phoenix Saga.
Yeah.
But not at the end of the episode.
Yeah, so like they like upgraded her, or quote unquote upgraded, you know, like the footage for the recap.
I still can't believe that John doesn't listen to the fucking theme song every time. Jesus Christ.
Because if nothing else,
what are you doing?
if nothing else, even if it's not for the song, my argument would be like, which version of the song is on the intro will give you a heads up if it's going to be like a questionable episode or not. because when they have the revamped theme song, it's like, ooh, this is the other studio.
Yeah. The real time airing latest episodes, like the post, and basically anything that aired in '96 was the problem era.
This next coming season.
Well, some of them, because the script order and the airing order is different.
They saved a couple of them and aired them later.
Yeah, so we had a few already.
Yes.
I asked Ron about like who did this. Did you do this one? And then we met up like maybe a year ago, I guess, at this point, and I played him the other version. He's like, I have no idea where that came from.
Wow.
So at some point they re-recorded it or remixed it or revamped it or something.
Oh, bummer.
The actual episode opens after the epic theme song.
Now you know how I felt during the Nightcrawler episode.
Right. I don't get to say we're 20 minutes in. Anyway.
We're probably a solid 10 though.
Yeah, we're
11:45.
There we go.
Shall I start reading Get Out yet?
No.
The actual episode
physically assault our guest.
The actual
Wouldn't
episode
be the first time, listeners.
Oh, nice.
It's not like you had to have surgery because of me accidentally hurting you.
That is true. That is not actually. He didn't hurt me to the point I had to have surgery. He did fuck my nose up pretty good. Anyway, moving on.
And that wasn't even fighting. No.
Yeah, technically, it wasn't.
That's how you know you're friends, when you draw blood from each other. Yeah.
You guys aren't friends yet. John, break his nose too.
I mean, he's thrown plenty of things at me.
He's just got these long legs and stuck his foot in my face.
Out of context, it sounds even better.
Wait, and did you both work in wrestling?
Yes.
That's even better.
Yes. That is how it happened.
Go for it.
Okay.
Nope, keep going. Push through, Rod.
No,
So
we're going to talk about it now. Let's talk about it now.
So the actual opening starts off at the Shi'ar Imperial Palace, which gives more credence to why the recaps are important, because otherwise it's like, where are we?
Who are these people?
And they're currently under attack. And my notes say Deathbird. I was super excited because I knew Deathbird from the video game. I didn't remember her being part of this series. And she's the one attacking. Oracle runs in.
So, sorry, before we even get to that, I just want to point out, in the order that it aired, there is a scene from the end of Sanctuary, which only aired like in real time 2 weeks before this, where you see Apocalypse and Deathbird have gotten Fabian Cortez.
And that was the one time that she made a cameo, right?
She made a cameo in that, and that is where we start to see some sort of relationship between them. But this isn't a spoiler because it's a thing that doesn't happen. There's no mention of that and no mention of Fabian Cortez in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
It's true.
Maybe it happens.
So even though there is in script order, a big break between these, in real time, it happened 2 weeks later, there's just a total disconnect of Fabian Cortez's involvement.
I mean, there's too many crises that happen in literally 1 year.
It's a busy year for the X-Men.
But Oracle goes to Lalandra.
Oh, that's right. So Oracle's like running to Lalandra, trying to warn her about the attack, and Lalandra's like, I already know because I'm both psychic and the ship is being attacked.
I did like how you had silver soldiers and then pink soldiers. So it was very clear. Like they were literally wearing the same armor as each other.
Yeah.
But this is the pink team and this is the silver team.
That's great. I mean, that's the whole concept of one of the reasons I didn't like the X-Men movies and why most of us love the X-Men cartoons is because...
You wanted pink armor?
Yes, I want pink armor. No, the
leather black costumes.
Right. Oh, God. Well, because the whole concept of comic book characters being brightly colored is that like easily identifiable, right? From like just kind of shape and palette.
Right.
Circumstances and stuff. And then when you take the X-Men movies and we're like, which Matrix knockoff character is Storm? And
it had to do with printing and art limitations. That's why.
Well, that's part of it too, right? Yeah. But also, like, when you're reading a graphic novel or comic book to see, like,
You really don't think they could have done the costumes in 99, 2000?
With the technology they had at that point, I think it would have looked hokey because aside from Spider-Man, the majority of the other costumes that existed in superhero movies did look hokey.
Oh, you mean the movies?
I'll give you the example. The Riddler costume only fit in the Joel Schumacher universe because it was so flamboyant and over the top, regardless of your feelings about that movie. If you had taken the spandex of that style and put it on the X-Men, I think it would have hurt them.
Interesting.
I just wish they would have updated it once it, like, started working, because I forget, when was Watchmen the movie?
That was like late 2000s, so like 2008-ish.
So by then, I was hoping they would adopt the spandex, because no matter what you think of the Watchmen adaptation, they pulled off the costumes, arguably,
totally.
And they were still colorful, and they just owned the camp. Like, they just, okay, that dude, he's in a hawk costume and whatever.
Owl.
I don't know, man. I just think that the X-Men were popular enough in the 90s that, like, you didn't need black leather to get people in the theaters to go see them. That's just my 2 cents, but,
Wasn't that the whole, like, Matrix curse, though?
I think part of that. I think the studio head at the time was just also, like, super skeptical about some of the more comic book elements of the X-Men universe. Like, I mean, like, he notoriously made Galactus a cloud in the Fantastic Four movies, and he didn't think that the Sentinels would work, even though Transformers became a massive hit, like, just several years later.
Well, they were also coming off of the success of Blade, and Blade was that gritty, super realistic, quote unquote, from a visual perspective, because it was as a character, he's always worn costumes that regular people would wear, and it didn't cross over into that like, you know, what Sam Raimi had success with Spider-Man.
Yeah. Do you think the periods of time where like dark, quote unquote, realistic or gritty costumes or stories kind of correlates with like good times in economy or culture?
Like, the darker the costumes, the better the economy?
It's kind of, yeah, because they said like the 2000s and then like the early 80s and stuff started getting super bubblegummy as far as like music, because people need an escape.
Right.
And things. So like the mid 90s arguably was like a pretty like decent time. I feel like I remember not just being a kid, but just like kind of living a little bit larger. You know, we had the malls going still and stuff.
Sure.
And so like, oh yeah, we want to visit the dystopian future. Now we're like, we don't want to visit. We want to get out of the one we're in.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I'm just curious. I don't know. I don't really know about film.
I don't. There might be something to a trend like that. I mean, that's certainly, you know. But I think there was also like the late 90s were like also just a super angry time. Like, if you go back to like look at like Woodstock 99, and like it basically like burned to the ground, you know, because it was just like this like horrible angsty generation. I mean, Fight Club and The Matrix all speak to that thing too, you know. So I think it's more just an extension of that.
And even comic book culture at that point had started to get darker too. Like, you know, the Watchmen, Dark Knight, all those things was when comic books started.
Those are like late 80s there, right?
Right, but that's what the comic books were. Like, comic
that
books,
was a
like,
reaction to Reagan, I think, more than...
agreed.
Yeah.
But comics were not bubblegum at that point.
Right.
So even in the comics, when they started doing like the new X-Men run and stuff like that with Grant Morrison as the writer, that was a dark time, and they literally switched the outfits of the X-Men. It wasn't until Joss Whedon took back over with Astonishing that you started to go back to the spandex feel.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Oh, Joss Whedon. Let's not touch that.
I gotta acknowledge that he was the writer, and we leave it at that.
Oh, right.
So
where were we? Like 2 lines in your run sheet?
Pink armor. Yeah. Speaking of pink armor, Deathbird herself looks worse than the last time we saw her. Like, animated wise,
we saw her for like 3 seconds previously.
Yeah, but like then we like actually see her as a focus, and she's like, it just not janky, but compared to what we saw her before, I thought she looked much cooler before when we saw her as a cameo. And she is there to overtake Lalandra's throne because I guess they're sisters. I remember. Yeah, I forgot that I knew that.
Yeah, she felt like it should have been hers, and in the comics you see, over time, you know, that the reign over who is leading the Shi'ar has changed between the two of them and a few other people. But that's a pretty perpetual story within the Shi'ar. So
in my head canon, it's purely based on they disagreed on what color the armor should be.
This is why Rod doesn't write the books.
She's like, see how cool my soldiers are with the pink armor?
Most people put fan fiction, and it's because of people fucking. Rod is like, nope, pink armor.
No, because I assume people are fucking already. We've established this.
They're arguing about armor color and fucking.
Yep. So
they would get more action if they had the pink armor.
Yep. Yes. Gladiator arrives, and then there is actually an animation error because Gladiator ends up fighting the ones in the silver armor.
I mean, he is not the smartest.
No, but there were no guards in that room with the silver armor. All the silver armor people were like on the gun turrets and stuff.
Yeah, he brought him with him.
and then fucked him up.
Yeah. He's like, I don't know if there's going to be anybody there. He's the one to feel needed.
He ends up grabbing Deathbird, and then she gives a very solemn and honest vow that she will not harm Lalandra.
And then Apocalypse takes Lalandra.
Yeah. Okay. So she said she didn't lie.
Apocalypse is in this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because he just kind of shows up.
Yep.
Yeah.
He comes through time. He comes through the portal of time.
Yeah. This is a time travel episode. If we
well, if they're listening to part 2 of this episode without part 1.
That's even more confusing.
There's some chaotic.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. So he shows up to take Lalandra, and that's where like Deathbird kind of reveals her whole thing's like, yes, this is what we aligned on, was that I would get the throne and you take Lalandra, and of course you can trust Apocalypse.
Well, the thing that I do love is in the comics, anytime whoever is the Empress of the Shi'ar changes, or the Emperor, automatically Gladiator is like, okay, well, I guess you're the new boss now. Like, as soon as that person is either dead or gone or defeated, he literally just swaps his loyalties instantly for the throne,
as one does.
But it's like, until I see her abducted, I'm still on her side. The second she leaves the room, then I know I'm going to end up bowing to you.
It's so funny because like in the current season of Simpsons, Nelson goes to Goon training camp, and they teach him there that like you protect the prime directive, or the primary whatever, I forget, like the not directive, but the person.
Nobody else still watches The Simpsons.
I know. But he does the same thing.
Nelson, the ha-ha kid?
Yeah. Well, because he does something, he beats up someone with a super unapologetic, attitude or whatever. And so I think Fat Tony, which, that character's aged well. He sees
To be fair, that's one of the least offensive characterizations of that series.
So he
I don't know, as an Italian?
Yeah.
Respect.
So he sees that and he's like, I see potential in this kid, And anyway, I've learned that that's like part of the thing about being a goon, at least in media, is that you snap alignments to whoever.
Whoever's the big fish. That's why, since Rod is running this episode, my alignments are with him.
Your alignments were with Rod for the previous episode. But shockingly, as Rod was alluding to, Apocalypse just releases Lilandra and grabs Oracle instead.
Which I'm, props to Lilandra for not immediately being offended. It's like, hey, I'm psychic too.
She is psychic, but I don't think she's a mutant. I think there's something about Oracle that she's qualified as a mutant as opposed to...
And she's probably more powerful. That's the reason she's the Oracle 2, the Empress or whatever.
You know what? You're right, though, because we know that there is a psychic connection between Xavier... Okay, good job, Rod.
Yeah, I don't know the power levels, stuff. I'm just assuming if there's an Oracle 2, another psychic, then that means she's probably more powerful.
I don't know. She was brain fucking Professor X for a while, so...
That is true. I mean, that's a whole different skill set, though.
Brain fucking.
There's definitely an OnlyFans dedicated to that.
Jeez. So many visuals.
I gotta sign up for OnlyFans, apparently.
So I hear.
Research.
Oh, yeah, we've been talking about that research.
That's right, wife, if you're listening, research. John Carl said it's okay.
You're going to get that call like Ralphie's friend in Christmas Story. It's like, you heard it from who?
Anyway, well, I would like to say Andre, 29, an African-American man, walks down the sidewalk talking
Ron, force through. Keep going.
So then we go to the mansion.
Before we go to the mansion, let's just be clear. When that happens and Oracle is abducted, Gladiator does formally capture Deathbird.
Oh, yes.
Just so there's not that lingering plot.
Oh, yeah. And then there's a super awkward moment between sisters. We're like, well, we're here now, and you just betrayed me.
I feel like that's pretty common between this family, though.
Yeah. But she thought she won. And then,
oh yeah, no, they've definitely had like mini civil wars before. It's just like, oh, how's that feel?
Yeah. Anyway, then at the mansion, Cyclops and Xavier are discussing what we kind of discussed before about how they're confused, like why just Jean? And Sinister's always wanted both Jean and Scott. And
because he really likes DNA.
Yeah.
He likes DNA. Cyclops sperm.
Yeah. and hovering like tube-like suction things around him, and definitely not.
Ooh. That's the only fans we want to subscribe to.
He's taking the DNA through the heart. And Xavier is confused in that moment as much as I am.
And they get interrupted because Xavier gets his psychic message from Lilandra about Oracle being taken and Apocalypse attacking.
So now they know that Apocalypse is the big bad, the true big bad.
Or I guess they put it together, right? Because
no,
not here. Not here because they don't have any connection to Apocalypse yet.
Never mind.
But he does say, "Assemble the X-Men."
He does say that.
Yes.
I remember.
Which is not a thing that I feel like he used to say in the comics often.
No, I don't think so either.
There's probably some dumb like 90s pun there, which is like assemble the X-Men or something like that.
My name is Joe Russo and Avengers Assemble.
That's the clip we're going to use. No context, just that.
No context.
Lots of yelling in the comments on TikTok.
This probably actually will.
Good.
And then at the Axis of Time, Sinister is walking through basically that famous M.C. Escher painting of the stairs, like where they don't end or go into each other.
Which why they built the Temple of Time like that, I will never know.
Because it's at the center and the gravity well around it. I don't know.
Okay, fair.
Also looks like Squid Game.
Yeah, a little bit.
Sinister goes to where Jean is being held in that tube thing and kind of gives his villain monologue of why he's doing everything. And it's the same as before. He basically wants to like genetically engineer the future population. And Jean's like, that will take generations. And this is one of the bigger icks for me. Sinister was like, well, with this axis of time, I can do something and then immediately see the results.
Yes, you can take Cyclops' sperm.
What? Okay, so why is that the bigger ick for you? Because all he's saying is like, I could start this experiment and then I literally leave and come back 30 years later. So it's just not waiting for shit.
Oh, because to me, it just not just implies, but kind of alludes to that he's going to be accelerating his operations. Because before he was running like one experiment and then waiting, for whatever. Now he's going to be doing this all day, rapid fire and stuff. So it's just kind of gross to think you're doing like
so
human
much
genetic
Cyclops sperm.
But just like human experimentation on assembly line level, right? So when he's just like, I can up the operation.
I guess the only thing is like, because when you're saying ick, it's like the Cyclops sperm comment is the ick, as opposed to like, he's just a mad scientist and he's going to increase his.
I think it's the eugenics part, but like up the ante,
It's the sheer volume.
Yeah.
Stop it.
It's funny because it's like sperm adjacent is the ick, but that's not the total reason.
Why is his face white?
Oh, Jesus. I haven't made that connection.
So Apocalypse returns with Oracle.
And gives his villain monologue. Wait, where am I? So Apocalypse, he kind of picks up where we left him, or where we left off with him last we saw him in the time travel thing, where he says when he first time traveled, he kind of fucked up, basically. He's like, he didn't know how it worked, and he landed at the Axis. He spent centuries there, which is like, I think as a kid, not having over a decade of like MCU multiverse time travel stuff, you're like, whoa, yeah, he's been there for how long? And then it's been an instant for everybody else.
I guess the question I have is, this Apocalypse has already lived for 5,000 years. How long has he been wandering around this?
He says hundreds of years.
He says centuries.
Centuries.
Yeah, so he's 5,500 years old.
Something
Wow.
like that.
That's a long time to putter around,
Because it takes a long time to figure out how time works. And he like, if I remember, there was a really quick
Bender's been doing it too.
That's true.
He's just walking around on the pathway instead of in this little citadel in the center.
I'm so excited you brought him back up. I can't wait to talk more about him.
You know what would have been a great...
Bishop takes a long walk.
Yeah.
Part two.
You
know what would have been a great but awful full circle is if they reveal that like Bender was Sinister after being there.
After performing all his Cyclops sperm experiments.
Yeah, right.
And that's what finally pushed him over the edge, like I'm going to be.
Because he also hasn't been in the Lazarus chamber, because before he said he had to go there every century. And so he hasn't been there.
But he also says that time has stopped here.
That's true, yeah. Except for Bender, who's gone insane because it's time.
Well, it just means that they're not like aging.
I have a question.
Uh-oh.
Does time stop in the little circle that they're inside at the center of this, and time continues outside of it? Or is like Bishop not aging either?
I believe it's the Bishop is not aging scenario.
Got it. So it's not that you have to be in like that glowing orb center.
Yeah, I think it's the entire area is considered outside of time.
Got it.
Not
Hence why Bender looks whatever age he looks.
Yeah, he looks like a crazy, like...
Not like a decrepit old dead person. Right. Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Well, it's kind of like in the Loki series where He Who Remains is right after the end of time or something like that, right?
Yes. Right.
Which in the original comic version of He Who Remains, it is actually a decrepit old man. But that's because they have lived through so many multiple millennia and stuff like that, but eventually their body just started breaking down.
Yeah, it still catches up with you, even in Infinity. That's what
now it's Jonathan Majors.
Which I'm so excited. By the time this comes out, Ant-Man will have been out, or very close to coming out, I think.
Let me tell you about Avengers and Kang.
No spoilers.
Says Joe Russo.
Sir, you are not allowed to spoil that.
But I can, and
You are not Tom Holland.
Okay. Moving on.
Which I just compile all the times he says an Avengers thing with Joe Russo, and then that'll be our clip.
And then we get a shot of Bishop walking around.
Yay, we're back to that.
But it's very, very brief.
Yeah, I think it's just there to remind us, like, oh yeah, right, he's part of it.
Bishop is here.
It's very weird to me that every time we bring up Bender, John takes his shirt off and shows us his tattoo in his back.
And it keeps moving.
Different locations, different poses.
Yeah. Yep. Weird.
Then we go back to the mansion. Xavier is briefing the X-Men in the war room.
This is where, as they're recapping, Gambit is actually the one who throws out the idea that there may be some sort of partnership between Sinister, the Nasty Boys, and Apocalypse.
Xavier figures out that they're
with the psychics.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so Cyclops says, well, cool, done deal. We're going to use Cerebro, find the other psychics. And then there's this moral debate of like, can we ethically use these psychics as bait instead of warning them? And I love Gambit's joke here where he's like, well, if they're psychics, they'll already know.
Hey!
So let's actually talk about that. Where do you stand on that front. Joe, as the guest, you get to respond first.
Should you warn people about using them as bait? Well, I think given the entire, well, I guess they don't know that the universe and all the time is.
They just know that there's, all they know at this point is that psychics have been taken. There was Jean taken, attempt on Xavier, and that Oracle, who is known to be a psychic for the Shi'ar, has been taken. That's all they know so far.
I mean, if I was the X-Men and I was trying to get Jean back, I think I probably would lean on the plan that they're going, which is stake out and watch and try to intervene. Because at the end of the day, if they warn them and then they cowardly cut a deal or something, it could mess up my plan, right? I don't know. Maybe.
Okay. Ends justify the means. Rod, your perspective?
I think I don't know where I would land at the end of it all, but I think it's worth the discussion specifically because these are superpowered beings versus like just civilians or something, you know? Like if it was just some unpowered person in the universe, yeah, maybe we don't use them as bait or we swap someone out for it. Like I think they've done in the past where they swapped out a normal human with like a mutant or something, or Mystique has been that a million times. But when they're like, these are very high powered psychics, like we're talking about like the Oracle and stuff. You know, they're like, well, if they're going for people like that high level in Jean, there's a good chance they can stand on their own a little bit and they'll be there as backup. But it's not completely black and white because it's also like you're just literally watching them and waiting, knowing things that they don't know. I love the psychic comment though, because my old music publisher posted this thing where he was at like a beach or something and had one of those signs, you know, that has like the pull tabs for your phone number. And it was like something psychic, pull a tab to make an appointment. And he posted the picture of that. I was like, why? And I was like, good point. Because you just show up, right?
Where do you stand on it, John?
So mine comes from a purely tactical perspective of there are going to be more psychics than there are X-Men who can do the stakeouts. Because if you're in this world with superpowered beings and the fact that it is literally going into a galactic scale to the fact that they went to Oracle as a part of the Shi'ar,
True.
You kind of need to have some sort of network of whether it's, you know, those that are heroic, those that are neutral, those that are villains. It would be impossible even if every psychic got one X-Men following them to guess the right ones. That would be my perspective.
Fair.
And
Well, I guess John would have beaten Apocalypse a lot sooner than the X-Men did.
I think most of us would have, we would have like detained half these villains after we caught them.
That's true. We're getting back to that whole conundrum.
Or executed of you.
Right?
Oh.
I guess maybe part of their, I don't know if this was just happened to happen this way, or it was on purpose, but like particularly with this first one we're going to discuss here in a couple of lines, it seems like they're starting off with psychics that aren't necessarily like all the way heroes. You know, that might be more morally gray or like you mentioned, like, might be a villain.
They start with Jean and
oh, that's true. But I mean, after they find out that they're psychics and they're like, if we're going to use them for bait, maybe we won't feel as bad if they're not the most noble psychic.
The Gambit line, I think, kind of covers that ethical conundrum just enough that we can, you know, buy into the plot and keep moving.
But I guess also as a kid, we also like kind of just accept that not all the psychics are like the Miss Cleo psychic, right?
Fair.
Yeah, that's true, because we don't actually say that any of these are fortune tellers. Because the ones that are known to be able to see the future in comics are actually fewer and far between. Like you have Destiny, who is Mystique's partner and stuff like that. But Jean, Professor X, none of them actually see the future. It's a different version of psychic.
I think they're just going with the fuck around and find out theory.
Yeah, well, that's generally the X-Men's.
FAFO.
Yeah, yep. It's a lot more exciting. You know, it makes for good television.
Of course. Shard throws out a really weird line there, where she doesn't know why, but she believes Bishop is still alive and his life is at stake. Mm-hmm. I was like, why would you know? Why would you think that?
Because family. We're just throw a Fast and Furious thing out like a decade before it happens. No, not like a couple of years before it happens.
Several years.
Yeah, this is a decade. Yeah.
Was it? Okay.
It was a decade.
First Fast and Furious came out in 2001. Yeah.
Really?
I was in college.
Jesus.
Yeah. So that's an old franchise.
VHS DVD
Yes, we
combos.
We are an old franchise. This is an old franchise.
30 years.
X-Men the animated seasons is 30-year blah 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 blah. Yeah. I can't do it. I don't spiel that well.
But family and Vin Diesel.
Yeah.
You'll see those foreshadowing Groot is where my mind works. Anyway, as a kid, they said I was gifted. They didn't know.
You have a music talent. That's like a sign of gifted.
Yeah, that's true.
I wish my bank account would reflect that.
Andre, 29, an African-American man, walks down the sidewalk.
Rod, keep going.
Well, he's also walking like Bishop now.
Yeah, exactly.
So we cut over to a place we haven't been to in a hot minute. It's Castle Worthington.
We've never been there.
We haven't? Oh, that's right. Yeah, okay. Well,
What about when we first meet him in the series, though? Isn't he...
he's at his castle,
He's at
right?
home?
No, he's in the
He's
ski
in
lodge thing.
the ski lodge.
That's
Oh,
right.
that's not his... Oh, I guess I never realized that wasn't
That
his
was
home.
no, that was like it felt like Tahoe or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
All right,
that's
you're
right.
right. Fair.
And then later when we see him with his like team of scientists, they're just in like a warehouse in New York.
That's right, yeah. So we're at Castle Worthington. I guess I got that mixed up with Banshee and Lifetime
Cassidy
Cassidy's
Keep.
kid. Yeah.
Right.
So it's a castle. But we're at Castle
It's
Worthington.
a keep.
Yeah, keep. Yeah. We're at Castle Worthington and we see a ninja scaling up the side of a cliff. I think most fans like recognize Psylocke, even though she's like in like a hood or something.
If you had seen any X-Men media before this, you knew this was Psylocke. It was the very thinly veiled secret.
I'll tell you, as a young, impressionable man, seeing Psylocke in the comics and her outfits, very, very nice. Quite like her character. Quite like her design.
But it's not even actually Psylocke is the funny part.
Wait,
What do you mean?
So-
Wait, what?
So the actual Psylocke, Betsy Braddock,
Uh-huh.
you've explained this to me before.
is a young British woman.
Right. And this isn't.
This is her consciousness, and forgive me if I'm saying the name wrong. She's in the body of a female assassin named Quinan.
Well,
Okay.
her.
Yes. So there's Betsy, and then there's this other person, and in the 90s, Betsy was living within this form.
Did we know that, or is that something that was revealed later?
This is all within the comics. Yeah.
Got it.
But in the comics, it was very clear that the original Psylocke was Betsy, the prim and proper British girl.
Right. Well, whoever's body it is,
Big fan.
big fan. 10-year-old Joe likey. 38-year-old Joe still likey.
For research.
Where is that OnlyFans, John Carl? Tell us about that one.
Oh, there's definitely
has to
there's
be.
got to be a
There
cosplay one
has
that
to
has
be.
covered this.
There has to be a whole tab.
Research. Research. Excellent. All right.
Anyway, so speaking of Psylocke, she sneaks in, kills a dog.
And stop. She does not kill the
She
dog.
literally
What did
stabs
she
the
do
dog.
to the dog? She stabs
it.
him with like a laser beam fist.
It is a psychic knife. It does not actually kill.
What is it? What does a psychic knife to your brain do to you?
It's like an EMP.
Oh.
This still sounds like the
Pretty
dog's
sure
not
if
going to be
you
the same
EMP
after.
the dog's gonna brains explode. And
But
dead dog.
Canonically, both in the comic and in the show, it is not fatal to be stabbed by that.
But to a human.
we do get reassurance, though, the dog is not dead.
Yes, that's my point.
Because Archangel, we see Archangel. He's in his, like, where we left him off with, he's turned blue.
Also, I love his outfit in this episode.
Well, it's now it's the angel inspired
Yes.
outfit as opposed to the horseman archangel outfit. Yes.
Which is confusing because he's like the post
Still
Archangel.
blue. Yeah. No, it's great. I like
Yeah.
I like the mashup. It's great.
And he checks on the dog first, which fair, I would do the same thing. And then he like looks up and sees Psylocke like breaking. I say breaking in loosely because she climbs in through an open window. So
She trespasses.
I mean, it's
Strut,
still
yeah.
breaking.
yeah, no, she breaks in, but she doesn't break anything. Like ironically, because the X-Men always break stuff when they're not breaking.
There were no skylights in the
Yeah,
castle.
right.
This was pre-skylight era architecture.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, she's entered a place she's not supposed to be.
And she's like stealing.
It was the first Olympic discus,
Yeah.
which to me, I feel like should have been in a case and not just leaning on top of a shelf.
I should also been in a museum.
No,
But-
rich people.
No, there's a clip of me on TikTok or Reels or whatever where I said like I love the way rich people logic. This is like one of them. It's like this is just sitting out here. It's a paperweight, but she's like looking. I guess her whole thing is that she's looking for like art and artifacts and stuff.
She also knows who he is very specifically because she throws out that he's a traitor. So it has gotten around in some circle that he is a traitor to being a mutant, and it's very rare that we've heard the mutant on mutant aggression between them like that.
Yeah.
That's something that became a bigger factor in The Last Stand when that was a part of that story. But up until this point in the show, there was really only that moment with Rogue and Wolverine that they were like, yeah, if anybody wants to get rid of their powers, like F them, for, paraphrasing sake.
Right. And also, I know Psylocke talks about this later, but the extent of her psychic abilities, is it pretty comparable to like Xavier and Jean, where they can like read within a proximity like people's thoughts and stuff?
It's different variations of psychic ability. It's not the same as a Jean. That's why she has the psychic knife. Mm-hmm. So it's still fucking with minds and stuff like that.
So she could even just found out, like you said, in some circle. Like,
I think she targeted him because of it, to be honest.
So she killed the dog.
Yeah. And as we know, you don't fuck with someone's dog, because this is where we got Psylocke John Wick 4. Or Psylocke Wick 4.
Angel Wick.
Yeah.
Is that an air freshener?
Yeah, it sounds like
Angel Wick.
Smells like betrayal.
And then probably what is Joe's favorite part of the episode, as a fight ensues, her outfit starts to fall off.
Hell yeah.
Because you were talking about like a Psylocke kind of ushering you into an era of your life. I always, not joke, just this, to be honest, whether it ages well or not, like Katana and Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman ushered Rod into puberty.
Oh yeah.
And so the 90s were really like and maybe, I don't know who was responsible for it, but to me, Mortal Kombat like brought in like the Bikini Ninja era.
They sure did.
Psylocke was that design before Mortal Kombat did it. So I would say Mortal Kombat was probably somewhat inspired by Psylocke's design.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things, just because you did it first doesn't necessarily mean like you were the one to bring it into the public,
But
like,
Joe would say
Either
they did it best.
Yeah.
Thank God they did it.
Right.
Thank God they did it.
Yeah, it's funny because like I actually, when that happened, I was like, oh, we're doing this. But then I was like, okay, if we get past the fact that she is wearing something, her actual outfit is like a little impractical for a ninja.
Little.
It's better than having the wavy hood when you're trying to fight. So
that's true.
At least ripping that off will give you something. I mean, it's not going to protect her.
Logic. Logic.
Rich people logic.
Yep.
They fight for a little while.
They end up outside.
When they're fighting, because Archangel flies and she's like latched onto him.
Yeah, she runs off. He catches up to her, and then they're at the edge of a cliff that's nearby. Mm-hmm. And then she decides, "Fuck it, I'm going for it."
Yeah. And surprisingly, clumsily jumps off like for a ninja, because she jumps. Like I had to rewind this to watch it. She jumps off confidently, but then she immediately stumbles when she
starts flailing. But she said she knew he was going to save her. So that I think was her acting of like, why is she flailing like that?
Elsewhere in England, presumably somewhat nearby, I don't know.
England's small.
Wolverine and
there are lots of bridges in London. Just to be,
there's something like whenever we see London Bridge,
it's actually Tower Bridge.
Yeah, that thing. So maybe they're on Tower Bridge. Something iconic that you could see. Shard and Wolverine makes a comment about
beautiful black-haired mutant psychic.
I'd say.
You say what, Joe?
But he says that's when to wake him up because he's getting bored.
Yeah, he wants. He's been ready to fight the last like few episodes. Remember, like even in the Christmas episode, he's like, "Where's the battle at?"
Yeah, he wanted to really fight everybody in the Christmas episode.
That'll be his magic Christmas.
Guys, that's just what you do on Christmas.
Says the guy from the Italian Family.
Yep.
You know what would be a great Christmas gift for Wolverine is you throw like all the friends of humanity into a pit and just like, "Merry Christmas, Wolverine."
Just give them one knife to defend themselves.
Yeah.
I honestly think you pretty much like that.
Yeah, but I do want to point out, because I think one of the iconic things for Psylocke is everybody who would look at the character model would say, oh, she has purple hair. Mm-hmm. That is something that has changed over time, especially from like the art of that time frame that would get printed in comics. The purple was usually used as a highlight as opposed to the actual like her having what we would consider today like dyed purple hair.
What did they end up doing with Olivia Munn?
They dyed her hair purple.
That's right. That's what I thought.
They did, but that was also more than a full decade. That was like 15 years later.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Well, more than that.
Man, Olivia Munn was one of the most,
actually 20 years later. You're right.
Most wasted castings, like in a good, like she was perfect, and then they wasted her.
There was nothing about her that is perfect.
As we said, okay.
That person, like visually, like when I saw her.
I'm not saying she's a trash person. I'm saying her acting in that role was a fucking waste.
Oh, gotcha. I don't know.
Time out. First of all, she looked great. Second of all, we already said
we've had a conversation offline about people looking great and wanting to be actresses.
True.
Ronda Rousey.
Oh, poor Ronda Rousey.
You're really gonna go with her for the looking great?
No. For the like, look. Well, as far as like being right for the role, looking wise, and then actually because she was the voice of Sonya in Mortal Kombat. In Mortal Kombat
that was
11.
A whole separate thing.
So perfect in concept because she kind of looks the role, but is an animated thing.
Yeah.
And then the acting was just not.
Well, she's gotten better. Her WWE personality is much better than it used to be. But we talked about in the last episode, X-Men Apocalypse, not the best X-Men movie. So, like, I feel like it's kind of hard to say.
It's shocking that it's not the worst, though. Both Dark Phoenix movies are worse than Apocalypse. I mean, it's bottom rung versus bottom rung. But
it is in the bottom tier, for sure.
It's definitely bottom 3.
Yeah, I think there's an argument to make about why it could be the worst. But that's a different conversation for another day.
That'll be a different episode.
I guess that is a scale of, like, what was the biggest letdown.
Yeah. The point is, I think she would have been great in another...
Nope. Rod.
Another
power through
episode.
Rod.
I'm going to start reading the Get Out screenplay again. If you don't let me
power
finish
through
my
Rod.
Olivia Munn as Psylocke was chef's kiss.
So then Archangel wakes up from being stabbed in the back, and just in time to see Psylocke take off in his car. So he just follows her to figure out where she's going. Wolverine hears the speeding car. Well, Shard sees the speeding car, and then Wolverine's like, already hear it.
Which I feel like you can't do. It's like, oh, I see that. He's like, I heard it 2 minutes ago. It's like, well, then why didn't you say something?
Yeah.
Like, you don't get to take credit for the thing that you're pointing out after somebody else has pointed it out.
That's like Brian and Stewie, Family Guy. Stewie's explaining something, and Brian like, oh yeah, that thing. Like, don't do that.
So yeah, Wolverine just jumps off the bridge, just straight up takes a dive.
And Shard's like, nice. She's kind of like, yeah, I found my people. You know?
Yeah.
And
she's also happy to just not be in a horrible future where it's dystopian. Yeah,
that's true.
To be fair, she did dive into this whole situation with about as little context as he just jumped into the water. So,
So she jumped into time.
That's right.
That's so extreme.
She sees Archangel arriving, and then she gives like what's kind of a little bit of a throwaway line, but as comic readers, we all know it's a bigger deal. She goes, oh, he's destined to join the X-Men. Whose side is he on now? If the Resistance is all about understanding the history of the mutants and what has led them into their current time, you would know who the most iconic heroes of this age is.
Yeah.
The one thing that's always bothered me about X-Men the Animated Series timeline is with Angel, because obviously he was in the original group.
Right, and we've chatted about that because there are those flashbacks of the original like Danger Room scene with, it's definitely him and it's not Mimic or one of the alternates.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, he was a part of the original team.
But they all act like they've never fucking met him before.
Right.
Yeah.
They acknowledge that nobody cares about Bobby not being there.
Right.
But him, they would just, nobody was Xavier or Cyclops, like, or Jean mentioned that, or even Hank.
It's very strange to me. I mean, that's like, as someone who is reading the comics at the same time, a 10-year-old is a 10-year-old who's reading the comics at the same time as, watching the show. It was very hard for me to process that thing.
Right, because it's either you have to acknowledge that he was there, and at least as a throwaway line.
Right.
Or you just remove him from any of those flashback scenes.
Right. So the idea that he is going to become a member of the X-Men was even more confusing. Right. Anyway, sorry.
So then we see that Psylocke has sped into basically her storage unit where she has like a bunch of artifacts. And I don't know what, they don't really address what she has there, but she makes a comment to Archangel. All these things are for her brother that has a more noble cause, because Archangel's the traitor that's tried to...
What's that about? I don't think I know anything about...
Her brother is Captain Britain.
Ah.
You've told me this before and I forgot.
Yeah, because this is Betsy Braddock.
Yeah.
Right.
Brian Braddock, who is not a mutant, is Captain Britain.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Peggy Carter is the only one that I have context for right now.
Nope. Literally, you are reaching across the fucking map right now.
That
Literally.
is an Easter egg and a half of a line, though, huh?
Because at least in this section of episodes, they never reference it again.
I think it's just to establish why is she robbing people.
Yeah.
Right.
And we've only ever seen Brian in one of the like flashes of multiple characters from another episode. He's never actually addressed in the series formally as Captain Britain.
The best parts of the show where you ask Rod who they all are.
We have some of those coming up.
Oh, good.
It's funny because it's gotten to the point, because earlier on I would try to like look through and see who I recognize, actually do, try. And then there were so many failed attempts that now I'm just like, my notes is too many cameos.
Too many cameos.
Yeah, she actually knows that he was literally trying to hunt down something that couldn't be killed, referencing his obsession with Apocalypse too.
Which is interesting of her having knowledge of Apocalypse, like what implications that has, like other people knowing about this, like thousands of years.
Like, is he just that loud? And he's like, I'm putting out the call for all these artifacts, and maybe that's the natural connection, because she's stealing artifacts to help fund whatever Brian is doing. It's like, oh, there are these priceless artifacts that could be funding something that's meaningful and helping, mutants and people, and he's using them just for his own personal vendetta.
Yeah.
Well, in the excellent movie X-Men Age of Apocalypse, or no, that wasn't what it was called, X-Men Apocalypse.
Just Apocalypse.
Yeah. Didn't she work for Apocalypse in that movie?
You can't take that movie as any sort of canon, though, because
That never happened in
because Storm was also working for him.
And neither of those things happened in the comics, as far as I know, right?
I'd forgotten that happened because that's when they went to Alexander's ship as Storm.
Well, again, that's why, unfortunately, she was kind of a letdown because she didn't get to be heard.
As it's happening, did you notice the reference that got dropped in the animation at that point?
I didn't see it.
The license plate. They're dropping everything in license plates.
Interesting.
It was THX 1138.
I know what that is.
I knew you would, which is why I'm shocked that you hadn't picked up on it.
Well, I'm not reading license plates in children's cartoons.
Well, that's your mistake, because we would learn years later in Marvel, that's all they do in the movies.
Is that George Lucas?
That is the George Lucas.
Okay.
So, yes, no, that was George Lucas's student film that he remade as his first movie, which was such a box office bomb, he had to completely pivot away from sci-fi, and it made him go make his movie American Graffiti, which, had that not been made, there wouldn't be a Star Wars. So, there you go.
And then a fight breaks out. Yeah. There's a very brief fight between Archangel and Psylocke, and then Sabretooth and Mystique arrive. And Mystique just immediately shoots Warren.
Which, I mean,
I
thank God, finally, someone does something like that, you know?
Because she has history with them.
Unlike Cable, who just let Apocalypse ramble.
Yeah. He's a very courteous opponent.
Yes.
Yeah, and Psylocke and Sabretooth kind of square off, and she gets a little bit of an upper hand, and as she does that, Wolverine just dives in and intercepts. It was like a really weird tag team move without even trying to be.
Yeah.
Wolverine's just so excited. He's been pent up for these last few episodes.
And he also will look for any excuse to fight Sabretooth, too.
That's true.
This is why I love this 4 run, is Sabretooth's in it, Mystique's in it, Archangel, Psylocke. I mean, it's literally like an early 90s X-Men fan dream.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we mentioned the first episode of this made more sense that it was, or it get that sense of the series.
That was going to be a series finale originally, yeah.
Yeah.
This might be our swan song.
It gave you everything. It brought it all together.
And
then everybody's favorite, Shard, arrives.
Yes.
Shard joins in, and then there are 3 really tacky jokes from Wolverine that happen at this point. He gives the fairer sex comment.
Oh, yeah.
He gives an insurance joke, and then he makes a Popeye spinach eating joke, all in rapid succession.
Yeah.
It felt very unlike Wolverine to me.
Yeah.
it's very of the time, though.
It was, but it also he hadn't been written in. Actually, you know what? The other Apocalypse episode where Apocalypse debuted, he also made a tacky joke like that about catching somebody as they were falling or something along those lines.
Right. Yeah, because everybody makes fun of usually female characters and these being heavy or something. Yeah, that was Rogue, right?
Oh no, I was talking about when he was fighting one of the horsemen and he was making a joke about catching them or something like that.
Oh, that's right.
But yes, he does also shame women in these episodes sometimes.
Yeah, the fair sex one, definitely probably the worst of the bunch.
Because this was in the and this didn't. It wasn't just the '90s. This went all the way. I mean, still today, obviously, but mostly in mainstream media stuff through the 2000s, where the joke was oh yeah, the girl can fight because the assumption is they can't.
Right.
And when you literally have Storm and Rogue, and
I know.
So far one of the most powerful ones we've seen is Jean.
Well, I mean, I think it just goes back to who's writing it and what are their preconceived notions. Different time.
And as much as it would age well overall as a show, it was still targeted to young male audiences too at the end of the day.
That's true.
And it might not even necessarily been an active, or probably wasn't an active thing with any writers and stuff. It was just like you said, of the time.
Yeah. Well, it's unconscious biases.
It's its version is that version of being progressive or open-minded, but kind of getting your sea legs for it.
Yeah.
So by the time this comes out, this movie will be out, so the embargo's lifted. But I got to go to the premiere of the movie called You People. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus, see, that's that drink coming in there.
Yeah.
Julia.
That one drink.
Yeah. I'm a lightweight, man.
Louis-Dreyfus.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus is Jonah Hill's mom in this.
Oh, yeah.
And so Jonah Hill the movie's about...
This is the Eddie Murphy movie, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Jonah Hill's dating a black woman for the first time as the premise of the movie, and the culture's clashing. And so his mother is well-meaning.
Sure.
But everything stumbles across the progressive. That's one of the biggest things in the movie. And then, Eddie Murphy's the opposite of that and stuff. But I think this is one of those lines where the intention was probably trying to, go beyond like the 90s assumptions and stuff.
Right.
But as time, like now you're like,
Yeah. I think another good movie that does that is Get Out.
So
Andre, 29, an African American man.
The fight continues. Psylocke ends up dropping Sabretooth on top of Wolverine, and then the camera cuts away, and we see dual shards, and one of them is holding a gun. So
I wonder which one it could be Mystique.
yeah. And then there's Wolverine tries to like one up it a second time because Psylocke is like, this is wasted on a psychic. I know which one you are. And Wolverine's like, yeah, I could smell it too. And it was like, we get it, dude. You know your shit. Your nose works on stuff. You have to stop one upping people.
he's been listening to Andrew Tate's like podcast or something.
Oh no.
But Wolverine, unlike Andrew Tate, stops Psylocke from stabbing Mystique.
Does Wolverine have strong smell in the comics too, or is that something
Yes.
for the show? Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty standard. That is part of it.
He's
That's
always
how
been-
he tracks
He's
people.
always been like canine, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
and also in Pride of the X-Men
Right. Yes.
that he still hasn't seen.
Still haven't seen that one.
Still haven't seen that, just like he hasn't seen Get Out.
Psylocke gets freaked out and is like, yeah, I'm going to get out of here because I don't know who any of you people are. And as she leaves, Magneto arrives and offers her a lift in a very nice way.
Yeah. It's like, hey, you want a way out of here? But then Psylocke makes the comment that I referred to last episode. What is this, a sci-fi convention?
Yeah. Which, by the way, which is interesting because she seems to know about mutants, and then also she sees them all together, and she doesn't
Recognize. She knows about Warren shit, which is probably more on the DL, but
Right.
these are very recognizable ones, especially the ones that are in the X-Men.
Yes. So, I don't know.
I just kind of saw
It's
it
a funny joke, though.
I just kind of saw it as like, even if she knew everybody, she's like, what are all these main players doing in one place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's jumping to the Hall H equivalent before Hall H was actually a thing.
Yeah. Or that clip I posted several weeks back where I was like,
I don't know what you posted.
it was Rick and Morty, and they were dealing with like the
Oof.
meat Magneto or something. I forget what it was. It was a Magneto parody, and it was basically our dynamic. He's cooking Magneto. And he was like, I'm cooking Magneto. And it's like, this is John. And then Morty was like, this is Rod. He's like, so how does that work? He's like, is it specifically cookies? Are the ingredients in cookies? That seems very dangerous with sugar. But I feel like Psylocke was in that. Like, what is going on right now? It's a little bit of a meta thing, For the story, we know it's cool to see all these spandex colors together. But when you're in the middle of it, you're like, what happened? I was just taking this discus thing from a rich guy, and now I'm in the middle of like every major player in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Or 1 year, I guess.
So before Joe could start reading out of Get Out, because his tells are very obvious, Neo captures Psylocke. At that point, Wolverine just straight up tackles him into the water,
Yeah.
and they start drowning, for lack of a better term. And then Magneto uses the anchor of the USS Tin Man, which is the ship that's nearby, and just chains up Wolverine.
Yeah, and Wolverine keeps forgetting that Magneto controls like magnetism and metal.
And he's made of metal.
Which they don't do a great job of addressing in this show compared to the comics.
Yeah, that's true.
Like in the context of the show, maybe because it's like once you've opened up that can of worms, you can never put it back.
Right.
That they just literally are like, oh, we're not going to have him just control Wolverine's body like a puppet.
Well, also, I think the image of him having the metal ripped off of his bones is pretty horrific.
What story was that out of, Rod?
Oh, I don't know. That's where you went. You need to recommend my face. Like, I don't. What?
Fatal Attractions.
Fatal
Oh,
Attractions.
gotcha. Oh, yeah, you told me that.
Had a
before.
hologram cover.
That just gave me like Airbender flashbacks, with, like the blood benders or whatever.
Speaking of Bender,
Oh,
we're not
yeah.
going back to him here.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, when do we get back to him? How's Bishop's Walk going?
Oh, yeah. We haven't been. Well, I say we haven't been there. We haven't been there in this conversation. Taking a few side roads. Magneto, he gets him on the ship and then throws the ship on top of the building they were just
Which
in.
is great.
That's massive. And I guess that's the power.
Also,
growth.
all those like priceless
Yes.
artifacts, fucking
God.
done.
And also like the little screen printing shop that was next door. Like whatever Jason business is.
Oh,
He's not wrong. I'm the first to say when I think Rod is wrong, he's not wrong.
yeah.
But that's a testament to how Wolverine's powers have kind of like grown throughout the show. 'Cause
Magneto's.
Well, Wolverine's surviving that.
He was still tied up to the anchor, though. He doesn't actually do the big fall.
But
Also,
he's in that
he
rubble
heals.
and stuff. He heals, but like we were in the earlier episodes.
He also doesn't heal anywhere near the way he does in the comics.
That's true.
because earlier on in the series,
Yeah, he had
would be-
bandages on for a while.
Like
Yeah.
multiple days, and it's like if he got that in the modern version of the comics, it would just be like, and I'm good.
yeah,
Right.
Or even like in the movie when he
That's
took
in
the
the
bullet to
movie,
the head
yeah.
and it just like spit it out.
Yeah. That was X2.
Oh, she's awesome.
So after dropping the boat on the warehouse, Magneto picks up Psylocke and they go through one of their portals, and Mystique joins in the escape.
And then Gambit and Storm show up just too late.
Just too late.
What happened? And
Storm's really messing up all of this stuff.
right.
She jinxed them in the first episode. She misses the fight in the second episode.
I lost track at this point, like who got taken through the portal and stuff. And
It had only been Psylocke because of the psychic.
And Mystique.
Well, she jumps through,
Yeah.
Right.
But then there was the animation mistake of the episode where Wolverine actually switched to the different side of the ship. Because he was originally on...
dear.
I don't remember which is starboard but it literally went from the left side of the ship to the right side of the ship.
That's pretty funny.
Stop. No. Here's the thing. We're not talking shit about Larry and the team who made it. We're literally just saying that Saban's animation studio did what Saban's animation studio does.
They sure did.
Storm uses her like tornado powers to
Clean up everything.
So I had this like random thought of, man, she has really good control and finesse of her tornado powers because
She uses it a lot.
she uses it a lot, but like it cleans up a mess without like killing anyone in the process, you know? Like
We don't actually know
Did it
that.
put that storefront back together, or is that poor person just out of luck?
They were in there the whole time.
Oh my god, they're dead. It's
They're in the
this is the
bathroom.
Man of Steel episode of X-Men the animated series.
and they find Sabretooth, who's unconscious because he was in the rubble, I guess. They chain him up and take him.
Basically, they see that Sabretooth was left behind, and they decide, we're going to take him with us, and they chain him up.
Back at the Axis.
There are now 16 tubes.
He built more.
Yeah, he had time.
They have all the time in the world.
And I have here the villains have a meeting, and I didn't think to write down. Is it Mystique? Sinister?
Before we get to the villains, there are 2 additional prisoners in there who haven't been addressed yet.
Yeah.
And who are they, Rod?
Dun, dun, dun.
Because I didn't know. My next note was for who was being brought in. I didn't even
So we do see a character known as the Game Master, who is a New Mutants villain.
Oh.
Gets added.
New Mutants from the Fox X-Men movie.
Right.
Nope. But we also do see there was a woman in there who had a yin-yang symbol on it. That is Karma, who is a New Mutant too.
Oh, okay.
Oh, lots of New Mutants.
Yep.
They're not in the movie.
Yeah. Just better for them.
Really, truly.
And then the meeting happens, and I think it was Mystique and Magneto.
Apocalypse calls Magneto a worthy partner.
Yeah.
Well, this is basically where Magneto reveals why he's working for Apocalypse.
Right.
Yeah. Because he's going to get Magda back, supposedly.
Yes.
Once again, you can trust Apocalypse.
Well, I think we get to that in a later episode. But, the whole thing is, like, if there is any way after he has gone through what he referenced of losing somebody twice, in order of episodes, that only happened a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
So it's at the point where he is the most desperate.
Yeah. Because he did go find Cow Lady or whatever,
Right.
knowing that it would be a trap, and still fell for it.
Because he had just spent some time with his fast pooping son.
Yes.
And that's when Sinister returns. And that's actually who brings in Game Master is Sinister.
Oh, that was Game Master.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Because I had like...
The guy who looked like Lobot from Star Wars, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah, and Sinister kind of says through his dialogue that Storm and Gambit were supposed to be protecting him because they like got distracted by the stuff that happened in England.
And then it basically, Apocalypse is saying all this is building to us grabbing Xavier, who's going to be the final prize.
Mm-hmm. Who was supposed to be earlier, but that all got fucked up.
It would have been great if he said that and then he just gave like the slow look over to Sinister of just like, yeah. He has to be the final prize because somebody didn't do their job.
Oh, it's all for drama.
That was interesting.
Oh, no, I would have loved to see Shade on top of drama.
That should be like the JC merch. Shade,
Well, that's
and then
because Apocalypse is beyond good and evil, John.
Oh, no, he said the thing.
He said the thing. He said the title. Andre, 29, an African-American man walks down the sidewalk.
Rod, power through, Rod.
We go back to Cable's future, which is $39.99
Yes.
Cairo.
Correct.
He's in the same place. Cable and Tyler are climbing up another cliff, and Cable tells Tyler, "You remember the nuclear bombs thing or whatever?" And
Nuclear armors.
He's giving it like a parallel to like how every country kept one just in case. And so he's like, "Well, they did the same thing with time machines because obviously."
Well, it's because they need to go back, and if they destroy it in the modern day, they have to go back to its point of origin because otherwise Apocalypse can just keep going back. And, because he only has to be in there for a short period of time. So he could get a spreadsheet put together and make sure he's like, cool, we're done, and I'm back in tomorrow.
Now, see, if this series or like the situation was happening like now, Tyler would like open up his phone, get on TikTok, he's like, my dad didn't think to do this before this last mission. Before.
Yeah, now he's doing it.
Because he had a time machine on his arm before.
I have a question about Cable. And it doesn't have to do with his son's arm being passed down through. Anyway, the Cable comic from the 90s. Wasn't it called like Cable 2099 or
no
2099
was a separate like alternate world, so that they had Spider-Man, Ravage, Hulk, X-Men, Doom, Punisher, and eventually Ghost Rider.
But Cable had his own run, and it was in the future.
So Cable has existed in different time frames throughout the entirety of the character.
So it's okay that he's in 3999. That's fine.
Yeah, he is brought to the future after being born in the present day, grows up in this clan Ascani, I think it's the proper name for it. Okay. And then it keeps going back and forth to try to better his future, which sometimes puts him at odds with Bishop, similar to the show, because him affecting a timeline, while it may be better because he needs it to still happen or his doesn't exist, keeps Bishop in like a very like shitty timeline, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, it's the sacrifice millions to save billions.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Oh, and you mentioned in one of our early episodes that Cable was kind of introduced as the show was happening in the comics.
Yeah, he was very fresh to the comics at that time. He had only been around for a few years.
So it was one of the reasons he was being pushed in the show.
Well, when was Executioner's Song?
90s.
That was 90s?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was late 80s. Okay. All right. I guess that tracks then. Yeah.
It's weird that we're all at the age where like there's like decades that just all melt together.
That's true. I mean, yeah. But I do. Yeah, it must have been in the 90s though, because I do remember like actually getting an Executioner's Song book off the rack. So John's probably right. Speaking of the
90s,
sorry, he was introduced in 86. Joined the New Mutants, which is that famous cover that shows his face. That was the character actually aged up to being an adult. Was March of 1990 though.
So the Cable we knew was the 90s.
Got it. But even still 90, and then when the show started in 92.
Yep.
Yes, I mean that's still.
He was still a fresh character.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. None of us are disagreeing on that.
Something else about the 90s in this show. So now that we've established that like the psychics are like the kind of is the MacGuffin the right word for this? Or not MacGuffin, like the prize. What do you call it? Like the thing everybody's going toward?
I would say it's not the MacGuffin because it actually makes sense, as opposed to the thing that was created only to exist in the story point.
So it's like it's
like there's the weather converter from G.I. Joe, which was like that had never been an established
MacGuffin
thing.
is the thing that everyone is after. So technically, the psychics are the MacGuffin.
Okay, so it's whatever like the prize of the things. Now that we know that that's happening. It's just like a story thing that you have to like suspend your disbelief for. Is like, luckily they all exist in this exact time in the 90s.
Yeah. It is kind of amazing that all of humanity changes. Like the future depends on what happens in the 1990s.
If we only knew.
Only thing I would say, is if you go towards like 50 years later to Bishop's era. A lot of them got fucking killed.
Right.
So there is probably a higher concentration because it is the start of a lot of people developing mutations between the 80s to 90s.
Right.
And then they start sentineling and murdering people. So,
all right, fair enough.
But it's just, like, even just that specific day is really interesting. That happens like real time, you know? I mean, I know it's because it'd be messy if you like offset it by a week or something.
Oh, yeah. Imagine if you were just grabbing people at particular days and it was out of time. That's where it would be way too confusing for a Saturday morning cartoon.
And they know that wouldn't work because of the story to Eternal Champions for Sega Genesis.
There was a story to that game?
So the story to that game was the reason they were all fighting was the Eternal Champion, like the glowy guy at the end. He took all these people right before they died in their own timelines, and
sounds like another thing that we've recently watched.
They fought, and then whoever wins gets to continue their life. And I forget the end story of it, but the reason was because one of them has to survive or whatever for time overall to work. But he pulled a bunch of people. I guess the assumption is that he froze time, just the overall time or whatever. But he pulled all these random people out of different eras and stuff, and like, that didn't mess anything up at all.
I mean, yeah, if you're gonna kill them right before they would have died anyway.
I guess that. Yeah, I don't know.
Again, travel. I'm just shocked that there was a story to Eternal Champions.
Right. Yeah, I say you know this. I'm a Mortal Kombat fan. People always are like, Mortal Kombat had this plot. I'm like, it had the most plot. Arguably, the only fighting game that didn't have like a lot of plot was like Street Fighter.
Yeah.
And then Street Fighter got a plot.
Yeah, I mean, that's why the Street Fighter movies have always been kind of clunky.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat has a great mythology.
Yes.
That's why that first movie fucking rocks. Anyway.
It's funny because I agree, but not. It's funny because when I first saw the first movie, I was like, "Oh, this is Mortal Kombat. It's a great movie," but like, I did. They accidentally made a good movie.
Yeah,
that didn't follow the rules that we were established. It was just like a different.
I don't know. I went nuts for it as a kid, and it felt close enough.
I did
to me.
too.
Yeah,
and we all got disappointed when we begged our parents to the second movie.
Yeah.
He transformed into a dragon.
You know what's a good movie? Get Out. Exterior, suburban night.
So the only trivia I was able to find for this episode in particular that we didn't talk about already is that it's actually an alternate voice actor for Magneto in this episode. It is not the actor who's been doing it up until this point.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, he did a good job of mimicking it because I didn't notice.
Oh, yeah. I absolutely didn't notice until I saw it on IMDb.
Yeah.
So.
Huh.
Very cool. I made all my tangents through the episode. So
what tangents?
Yeah. Mortal Kombat. We're watching Annihilation next.
Yes, let's put it on. Let's do a podcast about that.
Just in this podcast feed?
Yes, we'll just keep going. We'll just put it on and, it'll be great. Actually, what you really need to do, though, live stream John watching Get Out.
I feel like you know the whole plot by now.
He knows the first line of the script.
I know a lot of it at this point.
Wait, thanks for joining us. If you have any thoughts, like if John should watch Get Out in live stream, make sure to drop them into the comments for either the YouTube upload or Joe's social media. Our official Instagram post about this episode. If you like what you heard, we appreciate a rating on our podcast app of your choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and CastBox. I don't have it.
That's fine. We got 2 more of these fuckers.